as we welcome in the birthday boy, 1320 Kings insider and creator of the Kings Beat, our man, James Ham. James, what's happening?
What's going on, gentlemen? What's happening?
Did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, it was low key. Low key.
In a tree, build a greenhouse. What did you do?
No, see, I'm still on blood thinners. I can't do any of that
Oh,
stuff
that's
yet.
right. No saws for you. No
Yeah, no
saws.
saws. I'm not allowed
Chainsaw.
around saws yet. I think I have another 40-something days.
James's doctor gave him some blood thinners and said, James, you understand what this means, right? No power drills, no saws, no axes.
Like, oh, come on.
James, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, he just took a kid's like electronics away. What am I supposed to do without my tools?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I can't even I can't go weed eat. I can't do any of that stuff.
Oh man.
Yeah, because like if I throw a rock into my shin and I start bleeding, I could get a gusher and so. Yeah.
That's a damn shame. What happened to James Ham? What happened? Oh, he was weeding and a rock came back and clipped his shin. It's terrible.
It's terrible. Be careful out there, James. Be careful.
That's right. That's right. What's going on, everybody?
And we're just here talking about the Western Conference Finals. We'll dive more.
Miserable.
What'd you say?
I said we're just here miserable.
Well, yeah. So Luka getting to the Western Conference Finals didn't go over super well with the fan base last night. Understandably so. Do you think? I'll say we collectively, because we're all in this together. Do you think we will ever be able to let that one go?
No. I mean, you missed on a Hall of Famer. I mean, that's what it is. Like, you already see it. He's a Hall of Famer. You saw it in year one that he was a Hall of Famer. So for me, like, it's a little different when you're writing about it. Like, I just moved on from it. Like, for me, there's no reason to dwell on it, because I've got to cover what's happening now and just keep plugging away. But like the look back is just one of the more brutal look backs that we'll ever see in the game. I mean, he was just sitting there and the Kings passed and Phoenix passed. I mean, like, I know the Kings are the ones who get beat up, but didn't Luka just beat the Phoenix Suns, the team that should have taken him number 1 overall?
Who might not have the player that they drafted at number 1 next year.
Yeah, I mean, they're almost in the same position that the Kings are with Marvin Bagley, where they're just not sure if he's part of the long-term future, and they don't want to spend a bunch of money to see. They certainly didn't give him a gigantic extension. They gave the extension to Mikal Bridges instead, and yeah, what a mess. I really.
Yeah. It is interesting that Phoenix doesn't catch as much heat for that. I guess
when they go to the NBA Finals.
Yeah.
and that's really what it comes down to for me with this Luka thing. The reason why it's as loud as it is because the Niners. No, not the Niners. The Kings are still in the same spot. All these other teams that, passed on them, Atlanta traded them or whatever. Atlanta went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year with the guy that they traded him for. And while we know Luka is better than Trey and DeAndre Ayton, it hasn't decapitated their franchise the way it has for the Sacramento Kings. And I do think that it plays a huge role in it. I don't think it'll always go away, but the fact that they're not winning is the reason why it's such an issue. Like, the Kings for the next 2 or 3 years make it to the second round of the playoffs for 2-3 straight years. I don't think it'll be as loud.
Yeah, I get you. I'll also say, we forget about Jaren Jackson Jr. too, who, if it weren't for Ja getting hurt, may have made it to the conference finals. But if he doesn't this year, he will next year, the year after that. I mean, that team is too good, and he's a really good player as well. And the Kings missed on, it has turned out to be like a Darko situation, right? Where it's like LeBron James, Darko, and then Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade and Carmelo Anthony. That's your top 5, and 4 of them are in the Hall of Fame, and 1 of them is in the Hall of Shame. I mean, and so that's where we're at. I mean, and I feel bad for Marvin because, the injuries and everything else, but it really does feel like the Kings didn't do their homework with that situation, because it's pretty clear afterwards, as soon as you got him in Sacramento, that Number one, he doesn't play through injuries at all, but also like just the family dynamic. You can see those things. Like if you're not looking, when you're in an interview process and you're looking at the number 2 pick in the draft, that, I mean, if you have Luka, this franchise is worth another, 150, 200 million. I mean, like, it's such a bad business decision. That's what it comes down to. You just look at, you didn't do your homework on everything. And you ended up with a kid who, like, who doesn't stay on the court and who hasn't had a major injury outside of, like the broken hand and the broken thumb. But all of the other leg injuries, none of them were structural at all. And so, I just think that at the end, you really do have to, you have to turn over every stone, but also you got to interview so many people when you're drafting at the top end of the draft. And if somehow the Kings move up tomorrow night and they're in the top 4, they somehow squeeze into the top 4, they better get that right. They better know exactly who each one of those kids are, and then make the best decision that is for the long-term viability of the franchise, regardless of who's here now. And it's got to be the best player. And that's where the Kings messed up last time. They chose a player they thought fit better than the player who thought was probably the best. And I'll also tell you this too. Like, I covered that draft. Mike Schmitz from ESPN was all over Luka for years on this, but outside of that, there was a general consensus that Luka would come in and probably be like James Harden light. He'd probably be like 19 to 20 points, 7 to 8 assists, 7 to 8 rebounds. He'd be an exceptional player, but not a world beater. And then what you see now, what you saw instantly when he stepped into the league was different. So I know that there's a lot of people who think that they knew how good Luka would be. No one thought that Luka would score in the NBA like he does. I mean, they thought he'd be a good scorer, but not a great scorer, not a Hall of Fame player.
But I think a lot of people thought he would be the number 2 pick in the draft. Like, they thought he would be second, which that's a discussion in and of itself, because I'm still unclear how the hell DeAndre Ayton rose to the number 1, other than besides the injury to Michael Porter Jr. I have no idea how DeAndre Ayton ascended to that throne, but I had always, my coverage of the draft was always, in terms of, there's 2 players at the top. It's DeAndre Ayton and it's Luka Doncic, and then you'll have other players after that. I know Trey made a big run really, really early in the season, tapered off a lot there at the end. You had Jaren Jackson Jr., who was a guy that I really liked, the defensive guy. Like, you had other components there, but it was always DeAndre and it was always Luka. Or I take that back. It was DeAndre after the Michael Porter Jr. injury, but it was DeAndre and it was Luka. And it wasn't until, at least to the best of my memory, you could speak to this better than I can, it wasn't until the Kings moved up that all of a sudden Marvin Bagley got introduced into the equation.
Yeah, the Kings absolutely love Michael Porter, and if he would have been healthy, that would have been the number 2 pick in the draft, like almost guaranteed. Like, they loved him, and actually they were willing to take a gamble on him all the way up until they got the medical reports. They got the X-rays on his back, and then I mean, I was told at that time they wouldn't even touch him in the second round after looking at his medicals. And
what have we seen? The way he could barely walk on the draft. Like, he was walking so gingerly on draft night.
Well, he had a second back surgery before his first season. Then he missed his whole first season. Then again, he just had another back surgery. I mean, that's always going to be a problem. I mean, he might get a 10-year career. He might also be done in 5 years because he just can't keep going. And so the Kings were right to not draft Porter. I even thought they could have got back into the draft at around number 13, 14, 15, where he went number 14 to Denver, right? Yeah. They could have got back in there pretty simple. They had the ammunition to get back in the draft. And to me, that would have been a much better decision, if you would have got back in and got him. But again, they weren't going to touch him at all. And it is the right move. I mean, it's really unfortunate. But when I was watching Ayton as a college player, I could not believe that they were putting him at the top end of the draft. Luka was always number 1 in that draft. Ayton did nothing but pen down over the top. He had no post moves. He doesn't know how to set a screen. He doesn't know how to use screens. He doesn't know how to help his teammates get loose. Like, I would say the one thing that outside of, helping Devin Booker grow up, the biggest thing that I think Chris Paul did for that franchise was teach DeAndre Ayton how to be even reasonably good at like some of the basics, which he was not coming into the draft. I mean, and in his first year, he wasn't great at all. A lot of the same stuff you saw in college, just an overall lack of game. And, is he a solid center? Sure. But, I mean, you mentioned that he made it to the Western Conference Finals or the NBA Finals last year. Like, I think Rashawn Holmes would have made it to the finals with them if he was their starting center last year as well. Like, Ayton just really, he has moments where he does stuff, but other moments where you're just like, come on. Like, he's not a great player. He's certainly not going to be a multi-time All-Star. And they botched that pick equally as bad as the Kings did.
So do you, speaking of DeAndre Ayton, because I just threw around the conversation earlier. Didn't say I wanted him, but threw around the conversation. Doesn't look like he's going back to Phoenix. Is there any tire kicking that needs to go on with the possibility of him being in Sacramento? Or like going out there and making a move for him?
No way. I mean, not for Ayton. I mean, you have Sabonis, and there's no way those two can play together. So, I mean, when you look at the Cleveland model where they have all these 7-footers playing together, those are long, super athletes. I mean, you can't put two old school centers together at this point in the NBA. At least I don't think you can. And I don't even think you can do old school center and old school power forward at this point. You've got to have a stretch four. You got to have other pieces there. And Ayton, to me, doesn't make any sense for the Kings to chase at all, unless for some reason you think you're not going to be able to sign Sabonis. But look, Sabonis is just landed in Chicago and is going to be sitting at the NBA draft lottery representing the Sacramento Kings. Like, that's a big move by the Kings. That's like, look who we got. This is our guy. That's what that move is. And, they've done that with Fox as well. But, you got to really find the right pieces to go around him. And it's pretty easy to see what you need. You need long, athletic shooters everywhere.
Fox was the year they moved up, right?
Yeah, Fox is the year when they traded DeMarcus Cousins. I think they were a game out of the 8th seed behind Denver, I believe. And when they traded DeMarcus, they tanked the final 30 games of that season and moved up to the number 8 spot in the lottery. From there, they moved up to number 3, and then the pick swap forced them back down to 5. So, yeah, but if they would have continued to win, that pick went to Chicago as part of the Omri Caspi, J.J. Hickson trade from like 2012.
No, I meant the year. Well, that's a good explanation. They moved that year too. Didn't they move up from 8 the year they drafted Marvin? Wasn't De'Aaron the rep at the lottery that year?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, he repped them. He repped them one year, I remember.
It was 8 is technically a lucky spot, isn't it? If the Kings have moved up from there twice.
Yeah, it's 7 where 7 is where they always get stuck. And, like, if I go back, if like Lionel Simmons was a 7th pick, Bobby Hurley was a 7th pick, Jason Williams was a 7th pick. They've had the 7th pick. I think Walt Williams was the 7th pick. They've had the 7th pick quite a few times. Ben McLemore, right?
The names right there.
Yeah, Jimmer Fredette. They had the 7th pick in that draft, and they traded the 7th pick with Bano for John Salmons and the 10th pick, and that's when they drafted Jimmer at number 10, and they picked up John Salmons because Paul Westphal told them, please get me a small forward, anybody that can play small forward, and that's what they did in that draft. But that's Bismack Biyombo went number 7 in that draft. Yeah, the Kings have drafted 7 like so many times, and they've never moved up from 7. Unless the Fox deal was, but I still think that was 8. I'd have to go back and look. Yeah,
this is some Machiavelli stuff, but between the number of times that the Kings have had like a very unique pick at number 7, and the number of times that Kenny tells stories about when he was 7 years old, there's some weird numbers thing happening with number 7 here on this show.
It's really been going over your head since we started.
Weird vibes, man. He's doing that weird voice. So
7-minute abs.
dude, kids don't even know. Kids wouldn't even know about 7-minute abs of steel.
Yeah.
I don't
Awesome.
know
Yeah,
about
7 ain't lucky here, man. And the crazy thing about it is, like, people always say, like, oh, they're stuck in ineptitude and stuck in no man's land getting 7. Well, there's the teams after the Kings, they pick fine. Like, the Kings are passed up on numerous all-stars when they pick 7. So it's not them being at 7 that's the problem. It's they never get the good guy, the right guy.
Yeah, I mean, they passed on Clay. They passed on Kawhi Leonard. They passed on Giannis Antetokounmpo. But even guys like Steven Adams, CJ McCollum were drafted right after them. The Jimmer draft, when they dropped back to 10, they missed out on Kemba Walker, who I think was number 9. Yeah, they certainly have missed quite a few times. But other teams have picked at 7 and done perfectly fine. So, it might just be like a big, number that the Kings just it's usually a weird spot in the draft. It is. So
go back to the Cincinnati days when we drafted Oscar Robertson at number 1 back in 1960.
Who was the GM then? Let's bring him back.
I'm gonna guess. I have no idea. I'm gonna assume the individual is no longer with us. That's totally an assumption.
what year was it? 1960?
1960.
Les Harrelson?
Oh, get his grandchildren.
You're right. That's disturbing. I'm just gonna be honest.
I was right.
No, I said if you're right.
Yeah.
Give me the name again.
Les. Oh man, I want to say it's Harrelson, something like that.
That's gonna Jesse. Look that up. Jesse, who was the general manager for the Cincinnati Royals in 1960? That's what we need to know. Basketball Reference is not giving me that information at a quick enough time.
Him or his grandchildren on the phone. We need them here.
That's funny.
Find out if he was under contract during the draft, or if he had to sign an extension later. You've told us. I think some people got introduced to this story today from Sam Amick's article in The Athletic. You said there was weren't confident about the long-term future of Monte McNair's, contract status, and here we are. It's out there now. Monte McNair is in fact not under contract past this year. What do you make of that? Is that, hey, you got to show me something here in free agency? Hey, you got to hit on this draft. Hey, you got to build a contender heading into the season. Is he like a player? Will he get an extension halfway through the year if things work out, or will Mike Brown have a new boss next year?
Yeah, it's not a good situation to be in, and I kind of I was reading through Twitter this morning. I was on the go, but I saw my guy Greg Wissinger from the King's Herald. He said, why has Monte McNair earned an extension? Why is it that we're talking about he has to have one because your coach, he just hired a coach, and their contracts don't overlap, and so I would much rather have the discussion about him earning that. And for me, I think that when you take a big swing like you did with Sabonis, then you probably need to lock that guy up. And I think he did a really good job in that situation. A lot of the other situations, I think that they're like asterisks by his first offseason just because of the way that offseason, was so compact and part of the season getting pushed back and all that. It was just an absolute mess. If I'm the Kings, I lock him up. I lock him and Wes Wilcox up because I think they're on the same exact contract. But I don't know if they will. I've had those conversations too, and we have talked about that in the past. That he's like, for everything I've heard, he's not under contract past this year. There's some talk about maybe there's a team option for year 4, but yeah, I don't know.
A 3-year contract is unusual, isn't it? For for a coach, for a GM. Like I remember that being I remember Ty Lue telling the Lakers, no, I'm not signing a 3-year contract. Sign me to a 4 or 5-year contract like every other coach gets.
Yeah.
I'm not signing a 3-year deal. 3-year deals are bit unusual, aren't they?
Yeah, but I mean, this was a first-time GM. I mean, there was a lot of interesting stuff going on at that point. So, still, I mean, if you're going to have a guy make these decisions, these franchise-altering decisions, he needs to be under contract. Like, what you don't want is someone doing something out of desperation to save their job. That doesn't make any sense. And see, here's the great Will Z, Les Harrison. My bad, not Harrelson. Harrison from 1948 to 1958. I missed it by 2 years. Pepper
Step
Wilson.
your game up, James.
Pepper Wilson. Do you know how many rounds there were in the 1960 draft?
15.
21.
What?
There were 21 rounds, including Jim McDonald, who was taken by your Cincinnati Royals in round number 21. He was the only player drafted in round 21. As a matter of fact, the final 3 rounds of the draft only are Cincinnati Royals drafted players in those rounds.
Yeah, because at a
That's
certain point
crazy.
you could stop drafting. You're just like, yeah, I'm good. It's kind of like the baseball draft, right? The baseball draft has so many rounds. It's crazy, and I'm trying to think. This is
Number 2 pick in the 1960 draft. Anybody?
Bill Russell.
Jerry West.
Jerry West.
My guy, Jerry West.
Jerry
Yeah.
West out of West Virginia.
King should have took him.
We've been, well, worked out pretty well.
You missed.
We could have been the logo.
All the way back. Go all the way back. They've always missed.
Bam.
Always.
Imagine if Jerry. Imagine how different everything would be if Jerry West was drafted by the Cincinnati Royals / Sacramento Kings instead of the Los Angeles Lakers.
Rochester could have been the real LA. I mean, come on.
Man.
Come on. Yeah.
Lenny
brutal.
Wilkins, star-studded draft here. Lenny Wilkins also taken in the first round of that draft.
And you got the big O, so I guess it didn't work out too bad.
Yeah, you did well. I think you did well in that draft.
The opposite of this 18 draft. Yeah.
The 2018 draft.
Star-studded, and you came away with, what's his name, Jack McDaniels?
Yeah, I believe that was his name. That was, Jack McDonald, actually.
Jack McDonald. Yeah.
West Virginia Wesleyan College. Tony Wilcox went to Wittenberg University.
Oh my! They're drafting people out of anywhere. They really were. Wittenberg. Come on, man.
We need to get Jerry Reynolds in here for this discussion. He'll know all these guys.
Jerry
He'll know all of them.
definitely know all these people.
Jerry, I scouted all those guys. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Probably
No.
giving some obscure stat on them.
Yeah.
In any event,
So when with the whole GM coach, kind of marrying the contracts, do you say you don't think that will happen with this situation? Like it might not be coming a little later or something like that. You just kind of think they might just ride this thing in the final year of the contract for Monte McNair.
I don't think you do that. Like, I mean, we'll have to wait and see what they do, but they did this with Vlade. They matched Vlade's years of service with Dave Yeager's, and then of course, with Luke Walton's.
Yeah.
So they're still paying Luke and Vlade next season. I hope that they make the right decision here because again, like you need continuity. And while I don't think that like his first year on the job wasn't that impressive outside of, hitting a home run with the 12th pick in the draft, I still think that Monty has done enough to earn more time and show you that, he's got something. There is something there to work with. And you've also, again, you let him just do this whole coaching search and everything else. At some point, you have to actually, push the envelope here and like let's put this thing all together at the right time and do what's right for the franchise. So I'm hoping that happens. But again, like I heard up until like maybe a week and a half ago that they still hadn't, like there was no negotiations yet on this front. And so they're just people waiting for phone calls. Like, is this going to happen or no?
Do you know who previously held the title of Vice President of Basketball Engagement?
No.
Perhaps the proper question would have been, did the Department of Basketball Engagement exist before this morning?
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't, like titles are titles, right? So, and every franchise has different titles for different things. Like, people forget that, like, for years, everyone thought that Jeff Petrie was the general manager of the Sacramento Kings, and he wasn't. Wayne Cooper was. And Jeff Petrie was the president of basketball operations, which, again, at some point, the Kings have some, like, titles that are above general manager that they could probably fill in or they could promote up to here in the coming years. So, like, again, if Monty continues on his path and continues to build this thing out, you could see him being, getting a bump up to director or, VP of basketball operations, and then, or president of basketball ops, and then seeing Wes Wilcox become the GM, that kind of stuff. But again, we're just kind of out here and, like, we have no idea what Alvin Gentry's. I mean, I have it, like, written down what his role will be, and he will have an office in Sacramento, which is something that I'm pretty sure Tyrone Corbin never had when he was in a similar type position. So Alvin Gentry is going to be part of the Kings franchise, which, to be honest with you, I'm excited about because I think Alvin's a really good basketball mind, and it's good to have him around the team. And he's a good dude. His calm demeanor, his handling of things. I think he's going to be sort of an overseer of not really, like, decision making, but of like, just basketball in general. Like, what's happening on the court. Are there players that need conversations? Like, pick me up conversations or help outside of the game of basketball conversations. He is going to do some scouting with the G League in college and all that stuff, and he's going to travel a bunch. But at the end of the day, you kept him in like the program, and I think that's okay. I'm surprised he's not going to go, take over a lead assistant job for another year or two. But it's at a certain point, I think it's probably not a bad idea to kind of, like, go up into a front office and maybe get another couple of years. And so we don't know. I don't know how long his contract is. I do know he was under contract as an assistant coach for next season, but I'm sure they converted that and made some other adjustments, and maybe he got another year or two where he's going to be part of the franchise, and that's a good thing for me. I really do think it's a good thing. He's so well respected around the league. Someone in the chatty house mentions, oh, why am I drawing a blank?
Scott
Well,
Perry.
Rich says
Scott
they'll
Perry.
send-
Scott Perry. Yeah.
So Rich says they'll send Alvin out to apologize to the fan base when needed.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
He's got practice. Poor guy had to do it about 7 times last year.
Yeah, maybe he is the guy that says we didn't quit. He'll just come back and, like, oh, wait, Alvin's here. What is this? Oh, and now we know. Yep.
Didn't quit. Hey, guys, you know why I'm here. We're trying. See ya. We'll come back. We'll talk more Kings basketball with our 1320 Kings insider and creator of the Kings Beat, James Ham, here on Sacramento's #1 sports station, ESPN 1320. I love these questions. Who does Alvin report to? No idea. I need a second, guys. I'll be right back. Sorry.
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
Oh, man.
I don't even think that question could ever be answered. Like, who does he report to?
Why don't they have a president of basketball operations right now?
Because, again, it becomes a structure thing. Like, if you think you need that, then you make that move. I mean, Joe Dumars tried to slide in there and, like, got rejected. So, I mean, that's kind of what the role he was looking for. He wanted to be the guy that was in between Monte McNair and ownership, instead of, like, to the left, like, on an equal footing with Monte McNair, just in some, without anyone underneath him, as far as, like, he didn't have a big list of people who reported to him. So
You hear about that position a lot. And do you know if like the good teams have that, or is it just kind of split down the middle, like president of basketball ops and a general manager?
yeah,
Do
I
they
mean
have that in
it.
Golden State? Or is it all Bob Myers?
Yeah, Bob Myers is a lead exec, but I'm not sure, and I don't know what Bob Myers' title is, to be honest with you.
Mm.
I could probably come up with that. Basketball, Golden State, Bob Myers. Yeah, let's see. Well, that just gives you all of Bob Myers stuff. Yeah, that's a good question.
Because it kind of seems like I don't know the answer, but it kind of seems like we joke about the Alvin thing, but a lot of people kind of make up these titles and
Yeah.
have different roles.
President of basketball operations and general manager. So he has both titles. So again, I'm not sure that it really matters.
Right? Why didn't they
Yeah.
just make them? Why did they just make them one or the other?
Because they don't need to. Because they don't need to fill the other role. So he probably has like 2 or 3 assistant general managers. I should know who their assistant general managers are, but I haven't done a bunch of research on them lately. So
What's Pop? The president?
yeah, I think he
And
is, and then R.C. Buford is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Again, there is no universal.
R.C. Buford is the general manager.
Yeah, Pop is the president of basketball ops.
So Pop has more power.
Oh yeah, I mean Pop has all the power. Yeah, he's one of the few guys that are left though that have all the power. Actually, he might be the only one that's left that has all the power. Yeah, so he's president of basketball ops and of course the head coach. Yeah.
Who's the GM in Miami?
Oh, we see Pat Riley's in number 1. Is it Adam Simons?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Pat Riley is some mystical beast.
At this point, Pat just needs to own the Heat. The Heat are mine. They belong to me.
Yeah. Andy Ellisberg is a vice president of basketball operations and general manager of the Heat since 2013. What? Interesting.
Who?
Yeah. Yeah, I would even like looking at his picture. Like, in all honesty, it makes you even go, who again? Yeah. According to Google, Rob, we both Googled that. GTS.
I was listening or watching something.
These are Jill questions. Yeah.
Oh, Jill probably got a whole short series on these guys. Hang on. Live on the Odyssey app, live on 1320 AM, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. You can catch D'Lo and KC anywhere, anytime. We've got you covered. Of course, we're brought to you by McQueen and the Violet Fog, the smoothest gin in the world, handcrafted in Brazil. 1320 Kings insider James Ham with us here. Brought to you by the King's Beat. Make sure you subscribe to thekingsbeat.com and the King's Beat podcast, wherever you get podcasts from. I said subscribe to thekingsbeat.com. I meant go to thekingsbeat.com to subscribe to the Kings Beat newsletter. You can have all of this great Kings information delivered to your door. And of course, today, unlike anywhere else in the NBA, it is Lottery Day Eve. Literally no one else cares, but it's a tradition unlike any other here in Sacramento, where we just await where the ping pong balls land tomorrow. there's all of these, so many different hypotheticals. If the Kings move up, like, is the top 4 untouchable? Is the top 3 untouchable? Do you trade it no matter what? Do you trade it if it's 7? Do you trade it if it's 8? What if they fall down? Oh, that would be the most Kings thing ever. This roster's got to find a way to improve. And I don't know if that's through the draft. I don't know if it's through trades. I don't know what it's through, but there are so many different spots, James, that this team has to get better, that I feel like tomorrow's lottery in this upcoming draft is as inconsequential, barring a top 3 pick, is as inconsequential as anything that's happened in recent years, because there's just so many spots this team has to get better.
Yeah, this is a big offseason. They definitely have like placeholders that, you walk into next season. The roster is like close to full. I mean, they do have a lot of pieces already in place, but it's not good enough. And so that's where we're at, right? So you got so many expiring contracts. We've talked about this before. You got Terrence Davis, you've got Trey Lyles, you've got Alex Len, Mo Harkless, Justin Holiday. Yeah. You got a bunch of guys that are expiring contracts. So those to me, they're player archetypes for what you need. You just need better versions of so many of these. And, you need Mo Harkless, but you need a Mo Harkless that can shoot the 3. You need a Trey Lyles, a stretch 4, but you need one that can defend multiple positions and maybe block shots. All of these things. It is a complicated roster build. And again, that's going to be part of what, the list of things that Alvin Gentry is part of. I think he's going to be part of discussions. Like, what are the player types that we think that would work? Like as a whole, like, if you got Monty and you got West, but then Alvin has so much experience there that, in 35 years of coaching in the NBA, he knows a whole bunch about what has worked together and what hasn't. And so I think it's one of those things where you can start to like use him in specific ways as far as like team building and like just game planning. And so I like a lot of, it's just an interesting offseason. They don't have a ton of cap space as of right now. They could create a bunch of cap space without even really trying. They've got guys like Rashawn Holmes that still have value to go trade on the open market. They still have all of their draft picks for this year and the next 7 years. And then they have extra second-round picks in this year's draft, next year's draft, like 2025. They have all kinds of like little bonus stuff. And the next season, they have all kinds of cap space if they don't blow it this season. So I think what we're going to see is like more of an all-in. Like this is a moment where, we can talk about like the coaching search and Mike Brown and all that stuff, but like according to what we read from Mark Stein this weekend, 2 of the prerequisites for taking the job was that A, Doug Christie be included on the staff, and B, that you actually are going to go make the playoffs, that you're trying for the playoffs. This is not a rebuild. It's not a wait and see or slow play at 1 or 2 more years. This is very specific. It's time to go and win. And in order to do that, it can't just be about adding a coach and adding Sabonis at the trade deadline. It's got to be about like building out the roster the right way and having a quality product to put on the floor.
We didn't talk about that at all so far on the show. So I'll ask you, James, and you as well, Damien. You guys got a problem with that or reported prerequisite for the coaches coming in?
No. A couple of reasons. I mean, number one, like, and I'll just be right up front. I know Doug really well, and Doug only wants this team to succeed. He doesn't have any agendas. Doug is a good dude who wants this team to make it back, and actually he wants to fulfill what he as a player and his friends, the legendary golden age of Sacramento Kings were not able to accomplish, which is get the team to a championship and win a ring. And that's what Doug wants. And so I think Doug connects really well with players. I think Doug knows that he's not ready. I think, there's a lot that he can help with as far as like working with players one-on-one. I know he spent time in the last couple of weeks with Davion Mitchell in like, I think Waco, Texas. These are things that are good. Like Doug is not a conspirator. behind the scenes. That's just not his personality to go behind people's backs or to, cut the throats of people. And another thing about Doug is, like, in all the years I've known Doug has never been my source for any story ever. That's not the way he's ever worked at all behind the scenes. Like, even when it was announced that he was head coach, that he was an assistant coach, like, it happened so quickly that no one knew at all. Like, he walked into 1140 and made the announcement.
I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, he walked in and made the announcement that, he was joining the coaching staff and was gone. And I actually, like, called him right before he went on. I'm like, hey, are you an assistant coach? He goes, well, I'm not. I'm like, it's out there. He's like, oh, it's out there? I'm like, yeah. Like, he's not anyone's source for anything. There's never been, which you've had to worry about in the past, right? So there are assistant coaches that have been in Sacramento that weren't just media leaks. Like, they were high-level media leaks that were feeding content to Woj or, big-name people all over the industry. And you're like, what are you doing? Like, assistant coaches doing that. And that's not who Doug is, and it's not who Bobby is. Those guys, they don't go around making a bunch of issues for people. So I like that he's gonna. Well, I hope that he's gonna be there. We still don't know if he's gonna be there. I don't know if he's gonna be there. I don't think he knows if he's gonna be there. The assistants have not been told anything at this point.
Happy birthday to the homie Jason Ross, by the way. Since we're
Hey,
happy birthday to Jay
the
Ross.
Hornets play-by-play guy.
We're back to back.
That's ESPN. He with us. That's ESPN 1320s. Jason Ross, the play-by-play for the Sac State Hornets. One of the best parts about the Doug Christie story, though, is he didn't want to tell anyone at all. And he kind of alluded to he's like Jason kind of knew what was going on, and Jason was the boss over there. And so Jason's like, wait a minute. Do I need to tell my boss that you're leaving? Like, are you about to quit your job on the radio? It was the best story. So, like, his bosses down there found out. I think Jason said it was like minutes before Doug said it on the radio. And I just like, that's the best. Like, if Doug was a wrestler in like 1985, he'd protect kayfabe forever. he'd keep it real.
I literally called him. I'm like, hey. And he picks up. He's like, I'm just about to go on the air. What's going on? And I'm like, are you an assistant coach? He's like, I don't know. Where'd you hear that? I'm like, Doug, it just broke. He's like, oh, is it out there? He's like, yeah. I just found out. I'm like, oh, I'm so excited for you. He's like, I'm so excited to see you. Hey, this show's starting. I gotta go. I'm like, come on, man. What are you doing? Yeah. So look, there's an innocence to Doug. Like, if you know Doug at all, there's like, he's not some nefarious figure hiding behind the scenes that's trying to overthrow the head coach. He's just not. He just loves basketball. He loves being around the guys. He loves coaching. He loves talking about basketball. He is a full-fledged lifer. And I sure hope that he gets an opportunity, because he gave up a lot to take that job. And, I had told him this for years. Like, look, man, when you take this job and something goes wrong and they fire the head coach, like, that means that typically all the assistants gets fired too. And someone else brings in their whole new group of people. And you got to hope that you're the guy that the team sticks around with and keeps and says, there are coaches like this all over the league. People should understand that. There are coaches like Doug who are like part of the fabric of the franchise that have been around forever, that are on coaching staffs when other coaches leave, and they stick around and they're still there. And I think Doug is one of those guys that can help a staff, and they can go help a player do one-on-one drills and all this stuff. And watching, he's out again working with Davion Mitchell. Like, could you have a better person out working with Davion Mitchell than Doug Christie? Like, I mean, no, you can't. Like, he's if you want him to be an elite NBA defender, and he already has all the tools, but you need to teach him more of the subtle nuances of the game. Man, Doug is a guy. He is that guy. He's the guy that did everything in his power to slow down Kobe Bryant when Kobe Bryant was in his prime and unstoppable. So yeah, I think it's a good thing, and I'm hoping he sticks around. None of those guys know what the plan is going forward yet.
Yeah. And I kind of feel the same. Not kind of. I do feel the same way. I know where other people are coming from, and we probably even said it on these airways of like, hey, let these guys pick who they want to pick. Maybe I'm just biased because I like Doug and I trust him as a basketball mind, and you guys know more than I do. He lives by the code. It's not gonna be no mess with Doug Christie.
No.
So I'm okay with him being a guy like, hey, keep this guy around on your staff. Then obviously the other aspect of that, yeah, I'm absolutely okay with we're trying to make the playoffs. This isn't developmental. You know what it is from the second that you step in here, Mike Brown. This is what's expected of you. And if you don't reach that, we got a problem. Not saying you're going to be fired. I'm just saying we got a problem. All right. So I don't have a problem with either one of those reported prerequisites for any of the coaches coming in.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, if they were asking him to keep the entire coaching staff, that's a whole nother thing. If they're saying like, look, you got to keep these 6 dudes or dudes and ladies, you got to keep these 6 people. That's Mike Brown needs to bring in his own people. Like I've told you guys, like the Dave Yeager staff, where they're all like, they aren't just like buddies. They're like a family. They really are. Like if you look at Tick, he's like the dad, and then you got Big Bob, and he's like the big like the dude who thumps. He's the one that everyone causes problems, and he goes and breaks up the fight or thumps a bunch of people for you. He's like the enforcer of the family. And you had all of these pieces that were like really, really intricate to each other, the way that they interacted, but they had this trust. So if you sent Dwayne Tickner onto a podcast, he could tell incredible stories, some of the best stories you've ever heard. But at the same time, he never stepped out of line. He knew where his lane was as an assistant coach. And so he's not going to talk about, whether some players should be playing or another shouldn't and stuff like that. He's going to stay in his lane. And then we got to the Luke Walton era, and I felt bad for Luke because he tried so hard to do something different than what he did in LA. He got accused of bringing in only his friends in LA. And again, that's what Dave Yeager did here in Sacramento. But Luke was accused of like being a guy who just like a nepotism guy. Like if you know him, then you're in. If you don't, then you're out. So when he got to Sacramento, he tried to do it differently. And it was so awkward and painful to watch. Like these guys did not know how to like hang out with each other. They didn't it's like they had never even sat in a room and had a beer together. It was really awkward. And then you have assistants that won't talk to anybody because they're worried that they're going to step out of line and they don't know their role or who they are in some sort of hierarchy. And it just was awkward and very difficult to deal with. And so I'm hoping that Mike, brings in 4 or 5 of his guys that he feels comfortable with, that, whether it's video guys or it's, developmental guys, whatever it is, like bring in people you feel comfortable with, because at the end of the day, you got to be able to trust the people you're around, and you got to have some sort of continuity and feel for the people you're around. And you can take 1 or 2 guys that were on a previous staff and bring them into a staff like that and have them like fall in place. They got to be the right guy, but you can have them fall in place and kind of like help you along the way. And having a guy like Doug with all this knowledge about the players that were on the team last year, which a lot of them will be on the team this year, that's really, really important for him to be able to sit in a room and a coach says, hey, if we did this, this, and this, do you think De'Aaron Fox would have a problem with that? And be like, no, I think, but if we approached it this way, it would probably go over smoother. And that's where, having guys with, knowledge of the situation actually comes in handy, because there's a lot of that type of communication that goes on behind the scenes.
Are there any disadvantages that the Kings coaching staff front office may face if the Warriors, wind up in game, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the NBA Finals and are playing into the middle of June?
No, I'd say Mike Brown's probably already reached out and told quite a few people who, if he's interested, they know it. So, like his coaching staff, I would assume that he's probably built out quite a bit of his coaching staff just on quiet conversations at this point. So I don't think that there's going to be a big continuity issue when it comes to him and like how long the Warrior season goes. I mean, he is going to probably want at least. He's not going to have like true input on a draft pick or
that
a
was
trade.
my next question. Yeah. The draft was my next question.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think the best thing that we ever saw in Sacramento was the marriage between Jeff Petrie and Rick Adelman. And Adelman coached a team, and Jeff Petrie surrounded him with players that fit. And he knew exactly what Adelman needed every step of the way. Now, those two had a long-term relationship from their time in Portland, from their time as players. Like they had decades and decades of experience with each other. That's not something that Monty has with Mike. So that's going to have to be developed. And you're going to want to know who it is that he's kind of looking for, the types of players. So I hope that during the interview process, Mike was able to lay out what he would like, the plan that he has for this team, the types of players that would fit that plan, specific player names that might be available as far as free agency or that someone could go out and get in trade. All of those things I think were probably discussed during the interview process because that's kind of what the Kings were hoping to do. They wanted someone else to pitch them their vision of the Kings and how they could get them to the next level. And so if that's the case, you better have come prepared. Like if you're going to go in with a color-coded 200-page game plan, then you probably should have gone into that interview if you really wanted the job with a color-coded 200-page game plan of how to turn around the Sacramento Kings.
And that's what I've been saying the whole time. That's what I was trying to tell the professor, Jason Jones. I was like, he's got to, he can't spend all his time on the Kings. He's got to look. If you're going to try and interview for this job, you should be able to tell Monte McNair and Vivek more about the Kings than they know about the Kings. In my opinion, if that's the job you really want, do that background, do that research. You could be doing all the little work. And I'm only asking, this is probably more. I'm asking for an hour a day. Focus on the Kings. Look at film of a draft guy, of free agents that you might want, and then get back to the Warriors and all that other stuff and try to win that ring. But I feel, and I think this is what you're talking about, Ham, by the time he actually like officially gets here, it should be hitting the ground running. Like a lot of work should already been done. Now it's like formally in the office, not on Zoom, not on phone calls, actually talking to the other people in the front office, and we can keep this thing moving. That's why I wanted the job occupied by now, maybe even 2 weeks ago. That's all I'm saying. Now everybody's starting to see what I'm saying.
You still have a ton of time between, what is the last day for the NBA Finals is I think June 19th. I mean, you're talking about months. Like you got a whole lot of time. And, like I don't think, like I don't know this for sure, but maybe there is a cheat sheet that the like Doug and these other assistants who might be out in other spots around the country, like are they going in there and are they going over like Mike Brown's his terminology and his lingo? Because that's big. Like those guys should already be doing their studying. They should already have a book of because that's the biggest problem that you have when you switch coaches. It's that everyone runs the same stuff, but their terminology is different. And so for one team, it's this, another team, it's this. And so it's good to have that stuff kind of taken care of long before camp. And that's another reason why you want a coach to hire some of his own people, because those people talk his language. And so when he's expressing something and you got a player who's over there kind of like big-eyed and has no idea what you're talking about, assistants go over and be like, okay, this is the terminology that he just used, and this is how you need to decipher what he just said. And
defense. Why does he keep using the word defense? What does that mean?
Stop cursing.
Talking about defense?
Doug, what does this mean?
Using all that foul language in me, Coach Brown. I don't appreciate that.
I don't understand what this terminology coach uses. He keeps talking about defense and stops, and
we don't know. We don't play no stinking defense.
Yeah. We don't know what Mike's saying. We can't understand this.
Yeah.
Well, Tomorrow's the lottery. I think we're staying on the air for 5 hours tomorrow. I think we're staying on through the lottery. The beauty of this radio station is, for all intents and purposes, ours. We can pretty much do whatever we want with it. So I think we're going to stay on till 5 o'clock tomorrow through the draft lottery. Of course, you guys will have to monitor the draft lottery because the ping pong balls just shot up for the Davion Mitchell draft on my TV last year. So, my stream is a little far behind. So we'll monitor everything through your guys' TVs, and we'll be here live with you for the lottery tomorrow. That's James Ham. Make sure you check out the Kings Beat podcast, available wherever you get podcasts from, here on the Odyssey app, Apple, whatever it may be. Check out thekingsbeat.com as